KD's been killing it in the playoffs. He's been murking kids left and right. He's been going like...
Durant with the pull-up. Walk off limping. Durant from downtown. At the start, Durant for three. Here's Durant putting moves, crossover on Giannis, and hit.
To put it shortly, he's been KD. He's been one of the top 3 scorers of all time, and he is better than he was on the Warriors. At the time of this recording, he's putting up 32 points a game on 55% field goal shooting, 50% three-point shooting, and 91% from the line. This is KD at his most elite. We haven't seen KD this efficient before in the playoffs, even when surrounded by 2 of the greatest shooters in NBA history, and even with the 2 most dominating players in the NBA at his side. He's treated us so well now for so long that it's easy to forget one simple fact. What he's doing right now should not be possible. At least, that's what we'd assumed. If you remember the general sentiment behind his Achilles injury, which at the time of this recording was exactly 2 years ago, by the way, it was that he'd be lucky to even get back on the court, and even luckier to get to even just 70 or 80% of his former self. And when he signed with Brooklyn, there were some people saying this could have been possibly a mistake. If I remember correctly, I might not be. The reason for this, what seems to be complete blasphemy now, is, of course, the scale of his injury. The Achilles rupture, described as the kiss of death by an NBA surgeon and many others in professional basketball circles, coming back from a ruptured Achilles tendon is something that really hasn't been done. So how did he do it? Let's find out. This is the miracle of Kevin Durant. So first of all, we have to figure out why exactly Achilles injuries are so disastrous in the first place. So let's start with a bit of basic anatomy. The tendons that are within your body are the things that allow you to bend and stretch. They're basically connecting points of different places in your body. Primarily speaking, that means from a muscle to a bone. And out of all the tendons in your body, the Achilles is the strongest and largest. So when you tear that in half, you're cutting motion between your calf and your heel bone, meaning that it's impossible for you to move your foot up and down. And naturally, because your foot is a very important part of you being able to jump in the first place and move and do things as a normal human would, you can see very clearly how rupturing your Achilles could spell bad things for you on the basketball court, where all of those tasks are multiplied like 100-fold. So you get surgery on it, you rehab it, you try and nurse it back to health, but oftentimes in the past that has not worked for NBA players. If you're watching this, you've probably seen Jimmy High Roller's video on Kevin Durant's return, and in it he references a study with 12 NBA players from 1992 to 2016 that estimated that players only came back to roughly 80% of their pre-injury peak. For the study, they specifically used PER, or player efficiency rating, and found that oftentimes players would decrease roughly 3.4 points out of an average of 16.6. Dominique Wilkins was the only one to come back the same, if not better than what he was before. As for the other players, their statistical peak after the injury came 3 full years after the initial injury, or 2 full seasons. Meaning, even though they came back within 10 months on average, there was still another 26 months to go before they were able to reach their peak post-injury form. KD came back within 18 months of his initial injury because of the virus and opting out of the bubble, which would have been the longest in NBA history if it weren't for Mario Chalmers' 19-month recovery period due to his stitches coming out 3 different times and having to get 3 different surgeries because of that. Yikes. But regardless of rest time, KD is clearly breaking barriers here. In the 2 games that he did play within this regular season, he was 2 PER points better than the last regular season he played with the Golden State Warriors. And while his availability wasn't all the way at 100%, what he did and is doing is incredible. The last time that we've seen a star of this magnitude get injured and return was Kobe Bryant, who came back within 8 months of his Achilles tear. Now, the reason I bring this up is because you'd imagine that KD's 18 months from play would have affected his game in some way, whereas Kobe coming back after 8 months would have gotten back into the flow of things right away. But rather, the opposite happened. When Kobe came back, he said that he didn't feel a rhythm in his first game back, whereas Kevin, after his first game, said that it was easy, just like riding a bike. So what was so different with him? Well, let's take a look in the mind of the only success story there is, Dominique. He said that he worked twice a day, every day for 9 months, whether that be rehabbing in the water or trying to improve his ankle mobility and other things of the like. But he also said something else. He talked to Boogie Cousins. The quote-unquote fall of DeMarcus Cousins is very odd. when you contrast it to Dominique's recovery. You have a past day success all the way back in the 1990s, almost 30 years ago now. Then you have a modern day failure who hasn't been able to reach what he used to be. In fact, this season, while Kevin Durant was killing it for Brooklyn, DeMarcus Cousins was waived from the Houston Rockets, the worst team in the league, and then had to sign a 10-day contract with the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, granted, he did sign a guaranteed contract for the rest of the season, but this is Boogie Cousins we're talking about. This is a guy that was an All-NBA type player 2 years in a row, and now he's relegated to a 10-day contract. What happened? What did he do differently? What did he do differently from Kevin Durant? Was it the extra 30 pounds maybe, or his play style, or the amount of movement that he did? There's a lot of moving parts to this, so let's go back. Shortly after he tore his Achilles tendon in January of 2018, he was offered a 2-year, $40 million contract by the New Orleans Pelicans, of which he promptly declined, which made sense given that he was All-NBA 2 years prior, and he was most likely thinking that he was coming back the same, if not better. So after he declined the contract extension, the Pelicans decided to let him go, of which he promptly signed with the Golden State Warriors for a veteran's minimum after seeing the market was not very excited about him. Which was cool and all for him, given that he was creating what seemed to be the most overpowered starting lineup in NBA history, and he was able to do rehab with the team at the exact same time. So when he eventually got back, he put up 16 points and 8 rebounds, which sounds sort of bad on the surface given that he was averaging 25 and 13 in New Orleans, but he had actually had just a 5.3% decrease from the previous season's PER, and minimal stat reductions when you adjust for his minutes. And also, of course, he was on the 2019 Golden State Warriors, the tail end of a potential Warriors three-peat. Given that he was on a team with 4 Hall of Famers and in a completely different system than before, you could expect such reductions. So he plays into the playoffs and everything is looking good until the second game against the Clippers, where he tore his quad. He then made an appearance again in the NBA Finals when he clearly was not supposed to. After that, the Warriors let him go and he signs with the Los Angeles Lakers, and promptly after that he tore his ACL on the same leg where his Achilles was ruptured. And at that point, is basically up. When you're dealing with an ACL, quadricep, and Achilles injury all within the past 18 months, well then it's pretty obvious you're going to have some sort of reduction in play when you come back. So the theory is, if you'd have just come back after the Achilles injury and not suffered anything afterwards, he could have gotten back to his original playing form. But due to bad luck or coming back too quickly or whatever it was, he suffered another injury for it. And then another one, which basically sapped him of his athleticism. And in a league that calls for switchability and a non-lumbering big man, Boogie's time as an all-star, let alone all-NBA player, was officially up. And after a rough stint with the Rockets, it became pretty clear that having those 3 major injuries within a year and a half is more so the reason behind his decline than simply just the Achilles tear. So Boogie Cousins is the modern day poster child for Achilles injuries failures. But on the other side of the coin comes his teammate from both Houston and long ago in Kentucky, John Wall. His story is just as unlikely as Kevin Durant. He was out for 2 full years and came back averaging 20.7 assists and 3 rebounds, and had a chance to be a critical piece for a contender before James Harden got traded and or Christian Wood got injured. And mind you, this is after knee surgery, after... how many surgeries did he have? John Wall surgeries. Oh my. And mind you, this is after multiple knee surgeries, an Achilles rupture, and then an additional surgery after the Achilles rupture to clean out an infection. How is he operating in the NBA on that type of level? Well, he's checking off some boxes. John came back, just like KD did, after 18 months thanks to the bubble. He also worked on and developed additional moves to his skill set that he wasn't able to before because of the way that he played. So he had a whole new arsenal coming in. And also, he was 100% confident in his ability to get back on the court, just like KD. And most importantly, he overcame the mental barrier that comes with an injury of that severity. All of those things spelled an incredible return for him considering the circumstances. Now, that's one modern day success that we know about recently, but there's another one that isn't talked about nearly as much, even less than the John Wall. Rudy Gay. He tore his Achilles tendon in 2017 and since then has still been contributing to an offense the same way he did before his injury. In fact, his PER rating got better after he got injured. The only other player to do so after and since Dominique Wilkins, and before KD, of course. And mind you, these all came within the past 5 years. Now, here's where we gotta make something clear. There's nothing really too complicated about an Achilles surgery. All you're doing is sewing back 2 broken pieces together. There's nothing special to it. The only way that you're able to improve recovery from an Achilles rupture is through rehab. In fact, that's the main issue. For KD, he had all this special fancy post-treatment, rehab and all that, but the surgery was the same that they've been doing for a very long time, except for a few minor tweaks here and there. If you want to see the specifics of his treatment, I'll probably link it down below. It was done by Dr. Martin O'Malley in Brooklyn, and he had a whole plan and schedule that was more advanced than anything else, used fancy words like cold laser therapy or plantar flexion exercise, stuff like that. So there really wasn't anything special to do to KD that no other player had received before a change in treatment process, which was established in like 2013. Which is then very curious because that means that Kobe basically received the same type of treatment that KD did. Kobe Bryant came back within 8 months of his initial famous Achilles tear and struggled. Well, of course, this was Kobe Bryant, who was likely going to get his rhythm back. After 6 games, his knee gave up. And then, of course, as we know, a culmination of injuries battered and bruised Kobe's body to the point where he couldn't play professional basketball at the level that he once did. Likely retaliation for all the beating and battering he put it through back in his prime. But still, just like Boogie Cousins, he might have been fine if it was just the Achilles. It was a culmination of things that finally took him down and out of the count. From age to shoulders to knees, whatever it may be, it wasn't because of the Achilles. In fact, with today's technology, devastating career-ending Achilles injuries may just be a thing of the past. If you're still having doubts about this, remember Chris Clemens, the 5'9" point guard who was playing for the Houston Rockets on the fringe of the rotation, came down in December of 2020 with an Achilles tear and hauled off in a wheelchair. Following the modern protocols, it probably took him about 8 weeks until he was able to get into a cast, or just roughly speaking 2 to 3 months. March 8th to be exact. Now, you'd imagine he's probably right now taking set shots or something. Oh, that's after 5 months. Most of the recent Achilles tears have not been devastating because they were Achilles tears. They were devastating because they brought about something else. The fact of the matter is that KD may have not pulled off a miracle. Rather, it might have just been that the scare of the Achilles tear was no longer. And that fact has been hiding under our noses for longer than we may think. The rupture of the Achilles tendon is not devastating anymore. KD's miracle might have just been something that's normal. Thanks for watching.
I know you worked your butt off to get to this point, but did you ever think you'd be this good?
Is that a real question? Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
what you want me to say to that? Of course I did.